Late-night MRT rides were routine for Sophie, until a shadowy figure with hollow eyes began haunting her every move, even beyond the tracks. Watcher in the Metro, submitted by Sophie Dubois. I've taken the Metro Rail Transit, MRT, every day for the past 7 years. Like many Manolinos, you get used to the chaos, the crush of the morning commute, the clanging of the train doors, the smell of sweat mixed with diesel fumes as you wait on the platform. It becomes part of your life, a routine you barely notice. But a few weeks ago, something changed. It started with a man. I first saw him standing on the platform of the MRT's northbound Line 3, at the far end, near the darker, quieter part of the station. It was past midnight, and the usual sea of people had thinned out. I had missed the last regular train and was waiting for one of the last few to take me home. The platform was nearly deserted, except for him. He didn't move. He didn't board any of the trains that arrived and departed. He just stood there, still as a statue, watching from the shadows. His face was obscured by the dim lighting at that end of the station, and although it was a warm night, I felt a strange chill creep over me. At first, I told myself he was probably just another commuter, waiting for his train like the rest of us. After all, strange characters weren't uncommon on the MRT at odd hours, but something about him was unsettling. The next night, he was there again. It didn't matter whether I caught the train early or late. He was always there, standing at the far end of the platform, his face hidden in the shadows, his posture unnervingly still. I began to dread seeing him. Even though he didn't move or do anything threatening, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. The MRT stations are not known for their comfort. The platforms are usually sweltering, filled with the acrid smell of diesel fumes and sweat. But when I saw him, the temperature seemed to drop and a bone-deep chill would settle over me, even though I was surrounded by the heat and noise of Manila. After a week, I started avoiding that part of the platform altogether. I would wait near the front, closer to the crowd. But no matter where I stood, I could feel him there, his presence pressing down on me like an invisible weight. Then things started getting weirder. One night, as I sat on the train, staring absent-mindedly at the black tunnel outside, the lights inside the carriage flickered, plunging the train into darkness for just a second. When they came back on, I could have sworn I saw a reflection in the window, a face just behind mine. I turned around sharply, but the seat behind me was empty. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. But after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, even when the carriage was empty. A few days later, something even stranger happened. I was heading home late again, the station unusually quiet. The only sounds were the distant hum of trains on other lines and the occasional footsteps of other late-night commuters. And then I saw him again. He was closer this time, standing not far from where I was waiting, just a few meters away. My pulse quickened. I couldn't make out his face, but I felt his eyes on me, studying me like he knew I had noticed him. The train arrived, and as I stepped onto it, I glanced back at the platform. He was still there, staring, his outline hazy in the dim light. The train door slid shut, and for a moment, I felt a wave of relief. But the next time I glanced back at the platform, he was gone. The lights flickered inside the train, and a cold draft swept through the carriage, even though the windows were sealed tight. My skin prickled with goosebumps, and I gripped the pole beside me, trying to steady my breathing. I started hearing whispers after that. At first, they were faint, like the wind carrying snippets of conversations from far away. But soon, they became more insistent, low, unintelligible murmurs that echoed in the tunnels when no one else was around. Sometimes, when I stood waiting for the train, I felt something brush against my arm, but when I looked around, there was no one near me. One night, as I stepped off the train and the doors began to close behind me, I caught a glimpse of him again, standing just outside. For the first time, I saw his face, or what was left of it. His eyes were sunken and hollow, his skin stretched tight over his gaunt features. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. His dark, ragged clothes hung loosely on his thin frame, as if they were part of the shadows themselves. I stopped taking the MRT after that. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing him again. I started taking the bus or walking, even though it took longer. But no matter how hard I tried to avoid the trains, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, watching me. Sometimes I'd see him in the reflections of shop windows or catch a fleeting glimpse of him in a dark alleyway. But the worst happened when I saw him inside my apartment. I had just gotten home after a long shift, exhausted, and as I flicked on the light, there he was, standing in the corner of my living room. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His figure was blurry, like he was fading in and out of focus, but his eyes, they were fixed on me. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, and knocked over a chair. But when I blinked, he was gone. After that, I knew I had to find out who or what he was. I asked some of the older vendors near the MRT station if they had heard of any strange stories about the trains or sightings of a man like the one I had seen. One of them, an elderly Tejo vendor, squinted at me when I described the man. "They say there's a ghost," he muttered, lowering his voice as if afraid the spirit would hear him. "People see him on the last train after midnight. He's looking for someone. Some say he was a construction worker who died while building the MRT tracks. Others say he was a commuter who was pushed onto the tracks and never made it home." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I returned to the MRT that night, determined to confront him. I didn't care if he was a ghost or something worse. I needed answers. I waited on the platform, my heart pounding in my chest. The station was eerily quiet, the usual noise of the city muffled, as if the whole place were holding its breath. And then he appeared. He was standing at the far end of the platform. Just as before, his face obscured by the shadows. I forced myself to walk toward him, each step heavier than the last. My legs felt like lead, but I had to know. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why are you following me?" He didn't respond. He didn't move. I stepped closer, and for the first time, I could see him clearly. His clothes were torn and filthy, as if he had been wandering the tunnels for years. His face was pale, almost gray, his lips cracked and dry. His eyes were the worst part, dark, empty pits that seemed to swallow the light around them. And then he smiled. It was a slow, twisted smile that sent a wave of cold terror through my body. The lights flickered once more, and when they came back on, he was gone. Now, every time I take the MRT, I wonder if I'll see him again. The whispers in the tunnels haven't stopped. The flickering lights, the cold drafts, they all feel like warnings, as if something is waiting for me. And sometimes late at night, when I'm standing on the platform, I can feel him watching me, even though I can't see him. But I know he's there, waiting,